all the way in the other end.
It's 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
6
I
o'clock.
think Mike left already. He wants
Are
to
we
go
on
home.
the air?
Yeah.
What's on the air besides us?
That's
Are we
it.
going on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Traffic.
When I go like that, we're on the air. You could tell me when I'm on the air. You guys looks like pilots over there.
Bad idea.
Mike is coming.
Oh yeah? Oh great. Oh, you are so smart.
The music is stopping.
Okay.
Wait.
Okay, so we are live now, primetime Mondays at 6 o'clock with Susana Baker on Art Talk and with our special guest host, Alicia Frischberg. Good evening, Alicia.
Good evening, Susana. Boy, you're so happy today. Thank God.
I am so happy because I'm in a star-studded room with two good-looking men and their accomplishments, forget about it. They're amazing. They're the reason why this city is on the global map. It is, honestly, I have to tell you, I'm so honored to have both these gentlemen in this room. And my fans are going to love today's show because it's all about our magical, wonderful city, Miami. And with that said, I have Terrence Riley, an architect and founder of Keenan and Riley Architect. Good evening, Terrence.
How are you?
Very good.
Thank you for inviting us.
I actually sent you an email to say, what title do I use? I don't know if you saw that because we're going to get into all the different roles that are so important that made Miami and many other cities through your contributions. And also on the show today, we have Carlos Rosso, who is the president of the Division of Condominiums for the Related Group. Good evening.
Good afternoon, Susana. Thanks.
I am so happy to have you both. And the reason why normally this platform of the show, Art Talk, it's about the movers and shakers in Miami. It's about the people who really make that cultural difference in our city. We all know that for decades, Miami was seen as a place to come and enjoy the nightlife and to enjoy the wonderful weather, which is really the main selling parts in tourism all the time, is the beautiful beaches and the pristine sands. But there's so much more to Miami. And so much of the heritage and so much of the cultural that has come back to this magical city has been attributed to both mindsets of organizations like Carlos Rosso with the Related Group that has changed the skyline, as well as Terrence Riley being such a powerful force for this city. Terrence, when you decided in 2006 to resign from, after more than 14 years in the MoMA of New York, Martin Museum of Art in New York for the architectural and design. You had the Philip Johnson's chief curations there tenure for 14 years. When you decided to give in that resignation to come into Miami, what was the catalyst? What was the driving force? Because back then in 2006, this was still a ghost town.
Actually, it's a little bit different. I decided in 2005, and it was in the spring, that I was coming up on a big birthday. I had just gone through, as you said, 14 years in the cultural salt mines. I just finished, working very, very hard on MoMA's expansion. In completed building in 2004. And so I had actually discussed it with the director and had decided, I was going to leave the museum. I didn't want the museum to be my final stop. And I just thought, this is a good time. I was going to teach. I was going to go back to my practice, and I was going to consult with MoMA on whatever building projects they did. A couple weeks after that happened, I hear that Miami's looking for a new director, and they want to build a new building. And there was a few conversations, and I really couldn't believe that I was about to get back into the plaster dust and fundraising and public hearings and the whole thing. But it seemed exciting, and I had already almost finished building a second home here. So I was already kind of focused on Miami. It just so happens that since then, that's been my primary home.
You were coming back and forth from New York to Miami. Prior to that, you actually did the international headquarters for DACRA.
That's right.
I believe in 2004. You completed that project. So you already saw the change that was happening, because I think that is the real key, where the city and the leaders of the city get involved. And you're definitely the master of modernism, and you have those iconic touches in the works that you do in your plans and your design, and you're all about urban core. And so when you finally do get to Miami and you do take on the position of director of the MAM, then comes in the very interesting, controversial story of the name changing of the MAM and all the other stories that we hear in the back and forth. But that's where also comes another great organization, the Related Group, which Jorge Perez put money and changed the name. And in 2013, all the background work and all these great leaders doing like DACRA and the Design District, Lombardi and Goldman and Wynwood and all the urban core that's already done, all of a sudden, all that is great and wonderful. But to get a world-class museum now makes it a world-class city. And we never had that. And thanks for the efforts of the Related Group, Jorge Perez, I should say, to do that. And with you, Carlos Rosso, who's the president. And I'm so excited about this, because at the end of the day, Jorge Perez changes the skyline and does and brings in the possibility to create the PAM. And with the Perez Art Miami Museum, back to you, Terrence, you take on the director's role of architecture and design for the PAM. And then all of a sudden you do that, you bring in, you oversee all the architects, you oversee all the designs, you are the one that creates the board to pick who's going to do it. Finally, we decide Herzog de Moreau, and we meaning you and your whole team and all the leaders there behind that. And we get the $100 million grant, matching grant. And then you do it again. You give in a letter saying you're leaving. I think he has a metamorphosis every 5 years.
Well, being a director of a museum, and not just of architecture and design, but a director of the whole museum,
Yes.
it inevitably means wearing many hats. And I can't remember, the humorist said, what's his name, Will Rogers? No, the old-time humorist.
Oh.
Will Rogers.
He
Yeah,
said,
Will Rogers.
He said, everybody's stupid just about different things.
That's true.
And no matter how many hats you wear as a director, and you have to wear, nobody's good at all of them. And so I had been here for over 4 years. The economic crisis really slowed the project down. I had been imagining that this was a 6-year commitment plus another year or so and I saw that climbing, and so I realized I had to make a decision, because once the construction starts, you can't leave.
Right.
That is really leaving your institution
Yeah.
in a difficult place.
No, I actually commend
So-
you, because you left leaving the MAM in solid ground. It's not like you left, you made sure that money was in place. I mean, Pothurst says very great things about you. He says that he understood, and you left, leaving knowing that, okay, now.
No, we had the budget. We had a design that was on budget. We had the leases for the land. We had the commitment from the county, and was actually the county was actually beginning to disperse money. Things were at a very good moment. And another thing that, honestly, and I told Aaron this, when I told him that I wanted to go back to practice, the one thing that I was not good at, the one thing I was stupid about, was I was not an art historian. Mm-hmm. Okay? So, in terms of like the big collectors in town, when they think of a museum director, they think of a connoisseur as an art expert that they can sit down and talk to, and someone who knows all the same artists and goes to all the art shows and on and on and on. I wasn't that person. I was the guy to get the building pulled together and ready to go. And I pointed out to Aaron, your next director could be an art historian. And Tom Collins, of course, was. And he was a terrific choice. Terrific choice. I knew him since he was at MoMA as a fellow. And I think he addressed the whole issue of art and the collection extremely well.
And it gave you the opportunity to go to other things that you love, which is not only develop urban core and significant projects of global magnitudes, from Spain to China, back to New York. You have done and contributed from the $858 million project of the MoMA expansion to this unbelievable world-class museum. And I have to tell you, it's wonderful to see the modernism that you bring back to the city. What you did, even with the MoMA, you did 2 shows that were record-breaking in attendance. The Lloyd Wright show that you did, and the other one on... Yes. That was record-breaking. So even with the aesthetics of picking the right architectural team, the PAM, the building itself is a work of art. And
what was the hardest thing that you ever could recollect putting that deal together?
No, that's a good one.
Well, if you look at the time frame, didn't you say your topic is money?
It's all about money.
It couldn't have been a worse time in terms of financial planning. It could not have been worse. When you're planning a project of this scale, my friend here can talk about how that works in any big project, but to have changing funding sources, changing budgets, having everything, when everything is stable, the economy, your donors, and all of that, it's hard enough. Then you throw in these balls and you're just juggling all the time. Very, very complicated.
Makes you resourceful and makes you very creative.
But I remember some conversations. But most fun was working with the architects, Jacques Herzog and Pierre Demiron, and Christine Binswanger was the partner in charge, so she was the one we dealt with all the time. Christine was a student of mine. I'd known Jacques and Pierre for like 30 years at that point. What I don't know is how a non-architect museum director manages to survive one of these building projects. Usually it's a kind of a shotgun marriage, like the director doesn't know anything about building anything and doesn't know the architect, and they have to build a relationship, and the learning curve for the director is just, so immense. And so I actually had fun, and we could speak plainly with each other.
And I think it was a smart move of the ma'am to pick you, absolutely, because of all the urban core, because you could have the dialogue and the narrative move to where the city needed that. That building, it's amazing with the Stiltsville and your home look. Every time, I do a tour of Design District, so I'm stepping in front of your house at least twice a week and say, doesn't that one look like a real pink elephant in the neighborhood? I says, but if you look at it well, doesn't it remind you of the Pam in some places? So, and I have a great story in front of your house. I don't know if you know that, but that's me stopping in the Black Town and Country. Now, back to you, Carlos Rosso, the president of the Related Group. I have to tell you, hearing Terrence and being brought from the MAM, and then Jorge Perez, who is the head, the head and chairman of Related Group. Here he is. He donates $35 million. He donates all this work, and boom, the crash of 2008. And all these wonderful properties like Viceroy, Icon, all of a sudden he has to sell off his assets at reduced prices in order to gain some leverage. And that can be fun for anyone. And I know because I've lost a lot, as many people can relate listening to this program. But at the same token, something magical happened too in all of that. Because people from the culture, and that's one thing, you see that a lot of museums are put in the ghettos and in the areas that are a little depleted sometimes, in areas like it wouldn't go in, because they know people with culture and money will travel and will go in there and support. That's what happened with Lombardi and Goldman. When the George Gallery threw a big party in 2008, there were all kinds of Mercedes and Pradas walking in, and they looked and they said, wait a minute, And so with all that said, here you go, and now the economy comes back slowly. And I did an interview on Jorge Perez a year and a half ago. And I said, Mr. Perez, I'm honored to meet you. Thank you for what you did to this great city and the skyline. I hear that you're working on 32 projects. And he says, my dear, I'm working on 56. So with that said, Carlos Rosso, how you in the division of president, just like what Terrence Riley says, you wear so many hats. And from marketing, the absorption of the market, you say that right now this is a very aggressive growth company. Your projects keep coming out. There's not a magazine that you don't open up, whether it's Ocean Drive, whether it's Miami, whatever magazine you pick up, even Biscayne Boulevard newspaper, boom, there's a related project. Whether it be made in home affordable housing, rentals, or luxury condos, a related name is there. I also love the fact that there's a lot of cross promotion because you've also worked with other major developers in the last few years, and I think that's probably from the economy as well that has created leveraging of developers and actually coming together with the Fortune Realty Group and other projects, which I also commend Jorge Perez and, of course, you as a king of condos. Now, you come from MIT, University of Buenos Aires. You come, and why Miami? Where did we heard how Terrence, he was 50 years old, going through a change of life, birthday coming up, son, and all the wonderful urban core that brought him into Miami. What brought you into Miami?
Well, thank you, Susan, for having me in the program. First, I want to congratulate Terrence. He did an incredible work, and I think PAM is certainly something that we should all Miamians should be very proud of. During the opening of PAM, I was there with my wife, and she started crying, and I said, why are you crying? And she said, we don't have to look anymore up to New York or to Washington, D.C. Our kids can stay here. This is a museum for everybody in Miami, and this is a museum for all of our kids and the next generations to come. So this is something that makes me extremely proud, and makes me extremely proud of working for a man like George, because George never went back on his commitment. As you said, the commitment that he made to Miami hit us in the worst of our times, but there, I think the museum is up, and I think in big part it's because of his push and because of his willingness to give back to Miami all what Miami has given back to him. On the question of the cycle, I think Miami is maturing. Miami is like an adolescent, that a couple of years ago was still dancing in a club, and now suddenly has been given the keys to start driving, and to start driving himself or herself, in a world of competing cities, in a world where cities are trying to attract buyers to come and believe in those cities as places of growth. And that's what's happening to us right now in Miami. Miami is in an incredible moment. We were just as a marketing meeting this morning at Related, and in 2014 we sold condominiums to over 85 different nationalities from around the world. And which is incredible. I don't think that there is a place in the world that is growing in terms of international destination, You know, my kids, as a side note, all my kids are in public schools here in Miami, in South Miami, and they have kids from 20 nationalities going to school with them. You know, from Europeans to Latin Americans to Asians to Africans, they're all here and they all want a piece of Miami. The first thing that we do when we do all our projects is try to really sell Miami, because you really have to try to convince all these foreign buyers to come and bet on a city that is growing at an incredible pace and that is maturing and improving on a daily basis. So that's what really sort of excites me of the job that I do with George and with the rest of the team at Related. It's really try to position Miami in the place that it should be. Today, after New York, there's no other place in the US where buyers want to buy or own a piece of a condominium or a city as Miami. Nobody wants to go and buy a condominium in Philadelphia. Nobody wants to buy in Boston. Nobody wants to buy in Texas. They all want to come and bet in the future growth of Miami. And that's what really keeps us moving and keeps us doing things. You know, we are right now developing 14,000 units in Miami, from affordable housing jobs all the way to rentals to condominiums at a much slower pace than we were doing before, and which with a much more solid structure of buyers, you know, who are paying substantial amounts of cash.
That was my next question to you is, what was the difference, obviously, when those cranes were going up in the sky? We know, of course, what happened there. But the international market wasn't there as it is today. And obviously that's contribution of the IMF, you know, International Monetary Funds, and what's going on in South America with the discrepancy of value and the growth this weekend, the growth for Brazil and for many countries are going up by maybe 0.04%, and that's good. And some of them are not going up at all, like in Venezuela. So that definitely contributes a lot to the international investor coming abroad to look for where to place its money. But Miami versus New York, California, Chicago, like you just said, Carlos Rosso, people are coming to Miami. Miami was the city that from the economic disaster atmosphere, it bounced right back. And I contribute that a lot to people like Terrence Riley, Craig Robbins, Carlos Rosso, obviously Jorge Perez. You guys, with all the wonderful properties like Murano, Icon, South Beach, St. Regis, the Trump International, that was all South Beach. That's where the developer used to go. That's where you used to go and put all the money. As long as there was a view and water and sand, that's where everybody came. Now, Edgewater, downtown. I mean, places that are in most people affluent in the economy as of 2 years ago, that was the grit of the neighborhood. And here you come as a developer, and now Edgewater is booming. And so tell us a little bit, what took you from South Beach to Miami?
Well, I think it's a natural progression. There's a price issue, you know, there's land price issues, but at the same time there is a vision. We started in downtown Miami in 2000 doing One Miami, which was the first project that was built there. We started actually thinking that that project was going to be a rental project, then it was going to be a combination of offices and rentals, and then it ended up being all condominiums, and people told us that we were crazy, you know, for building One Miami. And we built a lot of condominiums in the past cycle of Brickell, and thanks to all those condominiums being built in Brickell, now we are starting to see what I think is the next sequence of urban evolution in Brickell, which is urban retail. You know, thanks to all the condos that we did, now we're seeing a fantastic 500,000 square feet of retail being built and developed by Swire, with all the Bal Harbour shops coming down to Brickell, which allows again more condominium development around it. And with all this mass of condominium buyers living in Brickell, now there's going to be probably in the next months or so more office buildings announced in Brickell. So the uses start sort of feeding each other, and with the addition of the museums, with the addition of Museum Park, it really starts becoming more of a serious urban core, a real city like we have in New York or like Buenos Aires or Paris or London. People start looking at Miami in a completely different way.
And they put them in, as you said, You know, after New York, people are investing in Miami, and I believe that Miami's definitely going to take right up the scale of #1 city to invest and to live in. Terrence, you're really big in urban core, and you did, oh my God, in China, you did a park, a large park, some renderings. I'm sorry, but you are right now when you do a project, you did a film that I watched not too long ago where you talked about the history of Miami and how Miami in the 20s and the 30s, it was meant you would walk. There weren't that many, you would walk, and the natural eyebrows to buildings, the actual verandas, they were meant for pedestrians if it rained. And the city then in the 40s and 50s and the 50s and 60s, it started to change into glass and forgetting about the pedestrian. Now it's coming back to that. You did that with the PAM as well, through the supervision of the architects that Herzog and the Moreau. And it has that wonderful, where lots of people could sit outside and eat, and if it rains, they're still outside, but they don't get rained on with the overhang. And so with that said, what do you see happening with the design district, Brickell Center? What do you see now with pedestrian transportation?
I think one of the things that's interesting to watch is the kind of pendulum swing in Miamians' attitude towards Miami. And I think there was a moment like in the 70s and 80s where Miamians were convinced they had a horrible climate and they wanted underground parking that was air conditioning. You go straight inside, you never go outside. They wanted mirrored glass. They did everything inside, everything air conditioned. And, there's 6 months of the year where it's hurricane season and it's humid and the wind blows from the Caribbean. And then there's, but I think the big change has been that people are more likely now to focus on the 6 great months and fashion their lifestyle around the best months and deal with the other months as well. But to not think of themselves as captives of their air conditioning and their car and things like that.
To walk out and explore their neighborhood.
Well, everything that's happening in the design district marks a sort of swing in confidence towards that kind of idea. That, like Rodeo Drive, it's a public street. And, once you solve the parking problem, and they're putting up, I'm involved with one of the garages, and another one's already almost finished. People get on the street and they walk on the sidewalks, and it's an urban experience. And I think that's it's really terrific. Mayor Manny Diaz, of course, pushed the bicycle lanes. I think there's other things turning up.
The Green Line.
Uber and smart cars. It's turning. I mean, there's still more Ferraris and Bentleys in this town than I've ever seen. I mean, you go to New York, you never see cars like that. I mean, it's just black town cars, right? But options like Car2Go, Uber, things like this are really changing Miami's attitude about the car and how it relates to their life. There's a motion, there's an item in front of the city council, city commission, to exempt buildings under 10,000 square feet from on-site parking. And this is going to change the development in the city. Right now, if you're building a small building and you have to have those parking lots on site, they eat up so much of your site that the economics of it become very shaky.
Right.
Not to mention that they create these buildings that don't come down to the ground. They've got these just blank holes there where you stick your cars. And honestly, while firms like Related are creating the skyline, when you're talking about building neighborhoods like low-rise neighborhoods, you need to have people who are building 3- and 4-story buildings. And if those aren't economical, those neighborhoods just never get what they need. And Wynwood, for example, Wynwood's got everything that the young generation likes. They've got, you can work in I think it's called the Miami Lab, hang out at Panta Coffee, all the different restaurants, cafes, art galleries. There's no housing there, though. And it's like, if you took all the brownstones out of Brooklyn, what would you have? You know?
Right.
So that kind of neighborhood development, not the skyline, but the
Yes.
the streetscape. You know, if you can't afford to build 4-story buildings, if nobody can really afford it, then that's hard for building neighborhoods.
We're
But
gonna-
can I say one thing about
Yeah,
Jorge
sure.
Perez?
Yes.
The timeline got a little distorted here. George, Jorge as we interchangeably call him, you know, he made a commitment to give $5 million along with a couple of other people very early on. You know, this was what gave the project credibility and legs.
Hold that
We're
thought.
going to hold that thought because we're going to come
Take a
right
break.
back after a traffic commercial break.
Folks, you don't understand. You are just being entertained by the most brilliant people here.
Back with Terrence Riley and Carlos Rosso. We're going to come right
Are we
back.
off the air?